August 19, 2026, Newark, New Jersey. Pier 84, Port Newark Elizabeth Marine Terminal. A CBP inspector cut the seal on container HLXU 447B NCIS 3. What's the submarine? Inside 96 titanium billets, each roughly the size of a railroad tie, stacked in wooden dunnage and wrapped in moisture barrier film. The shipping manifest listed the consignee as a Brazilian aerospace components distributor. The bill of lading showed origin a mill in western Pennsylvania. Neither document was accurate. Within 3 hours, 6 of those billets were on a flatbed under federal evidence tags, and agents from Homeland Security investigations were photographing serial numbers against a list assembled over 5 months of sealed federal investigation. The billets matched. Every single one. 9 people were already in custody. Across Ohio and western Pennsylvania, federal agents had executed simultaneous warrants at 3 machining facilities starting at 4:47 that morning. The operation had a name, it had a case number. What it had started with, though, was a single woman in an Ohio accounting office staring at a line item that did not add up. Agents Trake Talker for DO 30 Hook Resolution T's Penalties. That is where this story begins. Not with a raid, not with a surveillance operation, with a spreadsheet and a freight forwarder in Rotterdam that had no business being on it. The company was a mid-sized precision machining subcontractor incorporated in Ohio, holding several defense-adjacent aerospace supply agreements with primary contractors. Its work was legitimate, its contracts were real. Its export compliance officer had been with the company 11 years and had passed 3 separate government background checks. His name, for the purposes of this account, is Harlan Voss. He is currently awaiting trial. The woman who found the discrepancy was the company's senior procurement analyst. In the second week of March 2026, she was doing the kind of end-of-quarter administrative work captured in surveillance footage from the office floor, seated at her workstation, vendor files open, cross-referencing purchase orders against delivery confirmations. The task was routine. A mismatch in the quarterly vendor file was not. She noticed it at 11:23 a.m. on a Tuesday. A single invoice. Grade 5 titanium billet, ordered under a defense-adjacent aerospace part number $47,000, already cleared through 3 quarterly audits. The purchase order existed, the payment had processed. What did not match was the delivery address. Her company had paid for the material. The mill had shipped it. But the shipping document showed delivery to a freight forwarding address in Rotterdam she had never seen, never authorized, and had no record of ever approving. She pulled the freight forwarder's name, searched it, found it on page 6 of a defense industry newsletter dated 14 months earlier, cited in connection with a Turkish transshipment network under scrutiny for servicing Iranian naval refurbishment programs. She printed the newsletter article, she printed the invoice, she printed the shipping documents, she put them in a folder and walked down the hall to her compliance director. That was a Friday afternoon. From deception and on the major on the net was a bite. Retention checkpoint 400 Stakes Bend. Via Brantle following Wednesday, the case had moved to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service and Homeland Security investigations under a joint export enforcement referral. The compliance director had retained outside counsel within hours of reviewing the folder. Counsel had contacted the Department of Justice on Saturday morning. A sealed grand jury was impaneled in the Southern District of Ohio inside 6 weeks. Evidence collection footage shows agents laying it out on the table, 1 invoice, 3 printed documents, and a newsletter article recovered from page 6 of a trade publication found on the premises. What the investigation uncovered over the following 5 months was a diversion pipeline that had been running since late 2025, built on a structural vulnerability in how defense supply chains handle routine purchase orders. The scheme was not sophisticated in concept, it was sophisticated in execution, and in the layers of paperwork that made it look unremarkable. Here is how it worked. 4 legitimate U.S. machining subcontractors held real defense-adjacent contracts requiring high-grade titanium billet. The material is used in aerospace and defense applications, classified as a controlled export item under export administration regulations. Purchasing it for these companies was routine. Quarterly orders, standard purchase orders, payments processed through normal accounts payable cycles. The diversion happened between the mill and the delivery address. Somewhere in the logistics chain, bills of lading were being substituted. The original documents showed delivery to the purchasing company's facility. The substituted documents redirected the shipment to a consolidation point in Rotterdam. The original documents were filed, audited, and cleared. The substituted documents moved the material. The Rotterdam consolidator had been operating since mid-2025 under a legitimate freight forwarding registration in the Netherlands. It had legitimate clients. It processed legitimate shipments. Among those legitimate shipments, investigators determined it had also accepted and repackaged at minimum 61 tons of diverted American titanium billet over approximately 9 months. One detail from the federal complaint stands out. The material moved through 3 separate transit points, and at each one the paperwork was different. Rotterdam, Karachi, Bandar Abbas. Dash camera footage from the Border Patrol truck at the first intercept point shows agents pulling documents from a courier's bag, 3 different sets, 3 different listed consignees. By the time the material reached Iran, no document traveling with it carried any trace of its American origin. The original purchase records, the only paper trail that survived intact, were still sitting in the files of 4 Ohio and Pennsylvania machining companies when federal agents arrived with search warrants. 61 tons of grade 5 titanium billet. At current commodity rates, the material value alone ran into the low millions. Its actual strategic value was considerably higher. Titanium of this grade and specification, investigators concluded in coordination with Navy technical consultants, was consistent with the dimensional requirements for pressure hull ring frames used in submarine refit programs. Specifically, the Kilo-class submarine, a diesel-electric design operated by the Iranian Navy and subject to ongoing refurbishment efforts. Retention checkpoint, 50% mid-roll hook one. The question agents were working toward, through the summer of 2026, was not just where the material had gone, it was who inside the supply chain had made the substitution possible. Someone with access to the shipping documents. Someone who knew the audit schedule well enough to ensure the substituted bills of lading never surfaced in quarterly reviews. Someone, investigators suspected from an early stage, inside at least one of the 4 affected companies. Forensic photography from the evidence collection scene tells the story plainly. Agents photographed every page of the vendor file, spread across the table under evidence markers, purchase orders, delivery confirmations, altered consignee records. The scheme survived 3 quarterly audits because the paperwork looked exactly right. That is how mundane the answer is. The sealed investigation ran from late April through late July 2026. The primary case agents were from HSI's National Security Investigations Division and NCIS's Economic Crimes and Technology Unit. ATF provided tactical support planning for the warrant execution phase. The Southern District of Ohio Assistant United States Attorneys handling the case had prior experience with export control violations. The grand jury met periodically over the 6-week impanelment period, and by late May, the scope of the indictment had grown substantially beyond the initial referral. What had started as one company's freight discrepancy had expanded to cover all 4 subcontractors in the diversion pipeline, the Rotterdam Consolidator, 2 shipping companies with demonstrable knowledge of the cargo's actual destination, and individuals at multiple points in the chain. In June, federal agents moved. Surveillance footage shows the unmarked sedan outside the warehouse complex, body camera rolling as investigators approached the loading dock for the first time with a warrant in hand, an obstacle that nearly derailed the timeline. Surveillance of the primary contractor's export compliance office produced a 2-week gap in June when the target appeared to change his communication patterns. Encrypted messaging applications replaced phone calls. In-person conversations replaced emails. The case agents determined the target had become aware of something, though not necessarily the investigation. A decision was made to accelerate the warrant preparation rather than extend the surveillance window and risk the target moving assets or alerting the Rotterdam Consolidator. That acceleration created its own pressure. The simultaneous warrant execution across 3 facilities required coordination between multiple federal judicial districts, 2 state law enforcement agencies, and tactical elements from 3 separate federal agencies. The logistics took 3 weeks to finalize. Agents rehearsed the entry protocols for the machining facilities twice in the week before the takedown. Industrial machine shops present specific tactical considerations, heavy equipment, multiple access points, workers who may be on night shifts, loading docks that complicate perimeter control. The facilities ranged from a large operation in central Ohio with more than 200 employees to a smaller western Pennsylvania shop with fewer than 40. It became part of the plan because of intelligence developed in the final 2 weeks of the investigation. Surveillance of a freight forwarding operation in northern New Jersey identified 2 shipping containers of pre-staged titanium billet scheduled for departure from Port Newark on August 19. The containers had been in the port's holding yard for 11 days. Their listed manifest, agents determined, was fraudulent. Their listed consignee did not exist. Seizing them required coordination with CBP's port enforcement team at Newark, a separate federal magistrate warrant, and a timeline that had to align precisely with the facility raids in Ohio and Pennsylvania to prevent anyone in the network from warning the pier-side operation. If the facility arrests came through on open channels before the container seals were cut, the pier-side contacts could disappear. The decision was made. August 19. 40 OCD share. 4:47 a.m. for the facility entries. 6:14 a.m. for the pier. There is a line in the sealed affidavit supporting the facility warrants that reads almost like a fiction writer's shorthand. It describes the export compliance officer, Harlan Voss, as having coordinated the logistics of document substitution with full knowledge of the material's ultimate destination and the sanctions implications thereof. In federal charging language, that is careful, precise, and deliberately dry. What it describes is a man who spent 11 years passing background checks, attending compliance training, and signing export certification forms, and who at some point decided to use all of that institutional knowledge to move controlled material toward a sanctioned military program. What strikes me about Voss is not the scale of what he did, it is the mechanism. He did not hack a system. He did not forge documents from scratch. He used his legitimate access to routine paperwork to change one field on one document at the right moment in the logistics chain, in a way that an automated audit would not catch because the purchase order was real, the payment was real, and the only thing that changed was where the material actually went. Is retention checkpoint. Last 60s payoff and open-loop quiets, the 3 quarterly audits that cleared these invoices point to a systemic failure that goes well beyond this one case. Federal agents raiding the Ohio facility pulled filing cabinet after filing cabinet. Body camera footage shows drawer after drawer of clean-looking purchase orders, each one processed, each one paid. If the paperwork matches and the payment cleared, automated systems flag nothing. A wall of green indicators does not mean the material stayed in the country. That vulnerability did not begin with Harlan Voss, and it does not end with his indictment. The raid executed at 4:40 a.m. on August 19, 2026. At the primary Ohio facility, 16 HSI agents and a 4-person ATF tactical element staged at the perimeter of the industrial park at 4031. Thermal imaging confirmed multiple personnel inside the main building. 2 were in the loading dock area. The entry team moved at the designated time, 2 agents to each exterior access point, primary breach through the main entrance. Workers on the floor were directed to a central staging area. No resistance. 4 individuals detained for questioning. One of them was Harlan Voss, who had arrived at the facility at 3:50 a.m., approximately 1 hour earlier than his normal start time. Agents noted the early arrival and logged it. At the second Ohio facility, a final operation handling subassembly work, the entry went similarly. 8 agents, entry through front and loading dock simultaneously, 3 individuals present, all detained without incident. A review of the facility's on-site records began immediately, with document evidence collection handled by HSI forensic accountants embedded with the raid team for this purpose. At the Western Pennsylvania facility, the entry was slightly more complicated. A night shift maintenance worker exited through a side door at 4:49, 2 minutes after breach began, triggering a brief perimeter response before agents confirmed he was unaware of the operation and had simply finished his shift. He was escorted back inside and interviewed. He had no connection to the scheme. By 6 a.m., all 3 facilities were secured. At 6:14 a.m., CBP agents and HSI officers at Pier 84 in Newark cut the seals on HLXU 44T18 running 132. 96 billets. The second container, HLXU 44719 Sci-Fix6, was opened at 6:31. 88 billets. Combined weight 43 tons. Pre-staged and manifested for departure on a vessel scheduled to leave at noon that day. The material never made it to the gangway. 9 arrests total. Harlan Voss. 2 additional individuals from the primary Ohio contractor, 1 in operations and 1 in logistics. A shipping coordinator at the second Ohio facility. The operator of the New Jersey freight forwarding company that had handled the pier-side staging. 2 associates of that operation. 2 individuals connected to the Rotterdam consolidator, one of whom was a dual national and a second of whom was a Dutch national who had traveled to the United States on a separate matter and was detained at his hotel in northern New Jersey at 5:20 a.m. under a material witness warrant. The charges include conspiracy to violate the Export Administration regulations, conspiracy to violate the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, wire fraud, and money laundering. The IEEPA charges carry potential penalties of up to 20 years. The export conspiracy charges carry up to 20 years. Voss faces additional counts tied specifically to his certification role, which prosecutors have indicated will be addressed in superseding indictments. The Rotterdam consolidator remains a live matter. Dutch law enforcement, notified through established mutual legal assistance channels, has opened a parallel investigation. 2 individuals at the consolidator who were not in the United States at the time of the August 19 actions have not been arrested. Interpol notices have been issued. As of the current date, they have not been located. A third point remains open. The investigation established with high confidence that 61 tons of titanium billet reached Bandar Abbas. Navy technical analysts confirmed the material specification is consistent with submarine pressure hull components. What the investigation has not established, and may not be able to establish through available evidence, is exactly how much of that material was machined and how much, if any, has already been incorporated into a refit program. The 61 tons moved. What was done with it on the other end is outside the reach of the Southern District of Ohio. The 2 containers seized at Newark represent 43 tons that did not complete the journey. Combined with the 61 that did, the total diverted from 4 legitimate American defense supply chains across approximately 9 months was just over 100 tons. The case is United States versus Voss et al., filed under seal in the Southern District of Ohio, and partially unsealed on August 19, 2026, in conjunction with the arrest announcements. The procurement analyst who found the invoice discrepancy has not been named publicly. Body camera footage from the day federal agents arrived at the compliance director's office shows him meeting investigators at the door. Representatives from all 4 subcontracting companies were photographed in custody processing. One of the 4 arrived with separate counsel, caught on dash camera footage outside the federal building, attorneys leading the way through the entrance. One detail that has stayed with me through this case: the woman who found it was not looking for fraud. She was closing a quarter. She was doing exactly what her job required, which was to make sure the numbers matched. And when one number did not match, she followed it. She did not assume it was a clerical error. She did not route it through an automated exception log and move on. She pulled the freight forwarder's name. Would you have done the same? Comment below what you think happens when this kind of flag gets treated as a routine discrepancy instead. The network is dismantled in its American and logistics components. The Rotterdam consolidator is under investigation. The 2 individuals who were not in the United States on August 19 remain at large. The 61 tons already delivered remain unaccounted for at the point of end use. And the structural audit vulnerability that allowed 3 quarterly reviews to clear fraudulent shipping documents without a single flag has not been addressed in any of the 4 companies' export compliance programs. The pipeline closed. The demand that created it is unchanged. Subscribe so you don't miss the follow-on coverage as the Southern District of Ohio moves toward trial.